listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Happy Monday and welcome to The Briefing. Alligator Alcatraz is the notorious immigration detention centre in Florida that some federal judges want shut down.
Immigrant welfare organisations are claiming that the site is being used as a kind of black hole. The detainees are going in there and then without notification of their attorneys or of their families, they're being transferred to other facilities in the United States, or they're actually being deported without notification.
That deep dive into the immigration centre, how it got its name and how it's still operating is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Monday, the 27th of October.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, 2 suspects in the Louvre heist have been arrested, accused of organising the theft of $156 million worth of crown jewels. Last week, 4 thieves drove a truck fitted with an extended ladder and lift beneath a balcony at the Louvre before 2 men wearing high-vis mounted the ladder, were lifted to the balcony on the first floor where they cut through a window with a disc cutter. They entered the gallery and stole 8 jewels, including one containing over 2,000 diamonds.
The pair then fled back down and escaped on motorbikes driven by others, with the entire heist lasting less than 7 minutes. The Louvre's director says they took advantage of a blind spot on the museum that's not monitored by cameras. Over 100 investigators were brought in to search for the jewellery and perpetrators, managing to find and analyse over 150 fingerprints and DNA samples, which have since led to the 2 arrests on Saturday, one at an airport and another just outside of Paris.
According to French media, the pair are known to police, with the heist now believed to have been carried out by an organised crime group. Now, the jewels haven't yet been recovered and the men are still to be charged. But one thing I did find a bit amusing in all of this, Chris, is that the window that the thieves broke in through has now become a tourist attraction in its own right. And apparently since it happened, people have been gathering outside the now famous balcony and photographing themselves there.
Yeah, and I love it. I've been seeing the TikToks and Instagram posts about this, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I reckon I'd do the same. It is one of the world's most visited museum in the world. 9 million people rocked up to it last year, so that is a lot of heist window selfies that we're seeing coming through. Look, it did get us thinking, what's something random you've been photographed in front of, or that's become an unwitting tourist attraction? Perhaps it's now, that famous convenience store in Japan that people are getting their wedding photos in front of just because Mount Fuji's in the background. Or maybe it is this museum window. Maybe you are in Paris right now. Let us know in our broadcast channel on Instagram, Behind the Briefing. We will pop a link to that on our stories on Instagram now.
Staying overseas and to Malaysia, where Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump are both in Kuala Lumpur for a major summit representing nearly 700 million people. It's the annual ASEAN Summit, that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which includes countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines, and of course Malaysia, looking to bolster their security and economic relations with each other and the West.
It's also the first stop on Trump's first Asian tour since his re-election, where he's just penned another peace deal, an expanded ceasefire agreement between Thailand and Cambodia, which he actually first helped broker back in July, ending a 5-day conflict he says saved millions of lives.
I won't forget that day because it was one of the first wars that I got involved in, and I love doing it. I shouldn't say it's a hobby because it's so much more serious than a hobby, but it's something that I'm good at, and it's something I love to do. The United Nations should be doing this, but they don't do it. They turned off my teleprompter when I made a speech. I had to make a speech without a teleprompter.
No, I can't get past that teleprompter. Now, as for Australia's interest in this summit, well, here's what Albo had to say when he touched down last night.
We are now in the fastest growing region of the world in human history. What that represents is opportunities for economic growth in Australia, creation of jobs in Australia, as well as a more peaceful and secure region.
Now, there's also leaders from other global powers, including Canada, Brazil and South Africa, that are also at the summit, most hoping to chat tariff exemptions with Trump before he and Albo wind up in South Korea for the annual APEC meeting at the end of the week.
Back home now, where properties have been damaged and some are still without power this morning after wild weather lashed the east coast from Victoria to Brisbane yesterday afternoon and evening. Nearly 70,000 people were left without power in southeast Queensland, which also had nearly 100 kilometres per hour winds and golf ball-sized hail, which damaged a number of properties and cars.
Oh no, my car!
Now, that was one poor resident from Collingwood Park in Ipswich, which is just outside of Brisbane, getting absolutely hammered by massive hail. And meanwhile, there was this one house, Chris, that had construction equipment and barriers around it in the middle of Brisbane in West End, and actually toppled down in the storm. And I was unfortunately driving home during the middle of all of this,
gosh.
and it was the most lightning I have ever seen in a storm. It was like just crashing around the car, and it was both very cool but slightly terrifying at the same time. And just looking around, there was many lawns that looked like they were covered in snow from the hail.
Yeah, and meantime, in Victoria, there were very similar scenes to what you've just described. Hundreds of calls were made to the SES, trees were brought down, tens of thousands left without power, and torrential rain causing flash flooding in parts. There's a bunch of footage circulating at the moment of streets and businesses in Melbourne's southwest totally inundated, while some residents told the ABC they felt like their roofs were about to come off.
Like a tornado coming through. It was nuts.
As for the rest of the week, the Bureau of Meteorology said to expect more possible wet weather and strong winds in New South Wales and Victoria, as well as potential storms and a heat wave in Queensland. Nothing like storm season in Australia.
The federal government has ruled out granting exemptions to big tech when it comes to using the content of Aussie creatives to train artificial intelligence, as it looks to force developers to pay for what they've already scraped and used. Ex-Communications Minister and current Attorney General Michelle Rowland says it's about protecting the rights of Australian creatives and making sure that they can benefit from the significant opportunities that AI presents to our economy.
The announcement follows a proposal from the Productivity Commission, backed by major tech companies, suggesting they be given free rein to mine creative content for training their AIs. That idea sparked major backlash from creatives, including First Nations rapper Adam Briggs, who told a parliamentary inquiry last month it'd be tough to get the genie back in the bottle if companies could use local work without paying for it.
It's the equivalence of seeing a boomerang in an airport, that's been mass-produced. It lacks authenticity, and that's why you don't pick it up.
Now, the Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, is expected to meet with the government's copyright and AI reference group today and tomorrow to discuss next steps, including a potential paid licensing framework to replace the current voluntary system, which is crazy to me that it's voluntary to opt in and out of things like this, Tara.
Yeah, and basically the overall concern here, Chris, is that just these AI models, so think things like ChatGPT, Gemini and Meta AI, they scrape existing work that's on the internet to produce their content, much of which takes time, effort, money of these original creators to do, only to then be ripped and copied in an instant without any reward for them, which obviously just isn't sustainable, fair, but it generates big tech backers untold billions. And basically our laws just haven't kept up yet to try and stay in front of these tech advancements.
And if you're one of the millions of Aussies who work from home, well, if you're one of those who's been using Microsoft Teams to do the sneaky, suggesting you're still in the office when you're actually not, or perhaps dashing for a sneaky lunchtime beach run or school pickup, well, the glory days might just be over for you. A new update set to be rolled out, which will show your bosses exactly where you're working from based on the Wi-Fi you're connected to. I hate Microsoft Teams for doing this.
Yeah, and basically the idea behind this is to help bosses know whether you're in the office or actually working from home, to eliminate confusion, Chris, while there's critics obviously saying that this is a major invasion of privacy and micromanagement at its peak. But look, should put a asterisk there, it is turned off and on by default, so bosses will have to ask employees to switch on the feature, but as if employees will have a choice or then not raise suspicion if they tried to say no. Let's be realistic here.
Yeah, and look, we've said this time and time again, we don't get to work from home in this role, so we don't get the luxuries, but it's so beautiful to dream of the idea of just popping that little away button on and just running down to the beach and coming back and going, yeah, I'm still working, guys, still working.
Previous to this, I did get to work from home a bit, and I will vouch for those doing the right thing. It's also really nice to just be trusted and have a bit of time back in your day. But I think overall, whether you're doing the wrong thing or the right thing with your work from home privileges, I think it's good to know your employer will soon be able to track you in this way.
Yeah, look, and that is it for our headlines for today. Not the most beautiful note to end things on, but coming up next is Helen Smith's deep dive looking into Alligator Alcatraz. It's only been around for a few months, but it's already earned the reputation of being one of the US's worst immigration detention centres. Stick around, that deep dive is coming up for you next.
Have Have you heard about Alligator Alcatraz? It's existed for less than 4 months and has already become one of America's most notorious immigration detention centres.
Very soon, this facility will house some of the most menacing migrants, some of the most vicious people on the planet. We're surrounded by miles of treacherous swampland, and the only way out is really deportation. It's known as Alligator Alcatraz, which is very appropriate because I looked outside and that's not a place I want to go hiking anytime soon.
It took the state of Florida just 8 days to build it, who footed the bill of $450 million US, which they used for both its construction and the initial costs of running it. But since then, the federal government has reimbursed the state. And while a federal judge has ordered it to be shut down, it's still operational, with an appeals court last week approving a request by the Trump administration to pause the case amid the US government's shutdown. So what is life like inside Alligator Alcatraz? How did it get its name? And what does it signal about the US government's immigration policy as detention numbers hit record highs? David Smith is an associate professor from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. David, what can you tell us about Alligator Alcatraz?
So Alligator Alcatraz was a detention facility that was built on an abandoned airstrip in the Everglades, about 40 miles west of Florida. It was constructed over a period of just 8 days during the American summer. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty primitive and makeshift facility. The facility was largely built by the government of Florida, spearheaded by Florida Governor Rick DeSantis, but it is a federal facility. It is used by federal immigration and customs enforcement to house detainees while they wait for deportation or while they wait for their legal procedures around deportation to play out.
And you mentioned there some names. Whose idea was this?
This was actually Ron DeSantis's idea. It came shortly after Donald Trump had floated the idea of reopening Alcatraz prison in San Francisco Bay as a federal facility. Now, that's not a particularly feasible idea. That facility's been out of use for about 70 years now, and it probably can't be reconstructed as a prison. But DeSantis very quickly built this facility, which he called Alligator Alcatraz, because he claimed it would be as secure as Alcatraz would have been. Alcatraz famously was surrounded by the very hostile waters of San Francisco Bay. By building a facility in the middle of the Everglades, DeSantis claimed that detainees would be deterred from attempting to escape by the fact that alligators and other dangerous animals would be surrounding them. Now, most wildlife experts say that alligators don't actually pose that much of a threat to humans, whether they're running away from a detention facility or not. But certainly building it in such a remote location, what that has done is to remove detainees really from any kind of oversight by any kind of authority that is trying to look out for their welfare. So there is currently a lawsuit claiming that detainees have been denied adequate access to their attorneys. It's certainly a lot more difficult for attorneys or anybody else to get access to detainees when they are housed in such a remote location.
And what do we know about some of the conditions inside Alligator Alcatraz?
Detainees say that the conditions are pretty terrible. They say that they're only able to shower every 3 days. They say that they have to constantly reuse clothes, which are shared with everybody else. And that they say that the toilets often overflow and flood the whole facility with waste. The government concedes that it's got very strict rules for Alligator Alcatraz. It's shared the handbook that it uses, which says all detainees have to be up and eating breakfast at 5:30 in the morning. They're allowed very few possessions, and there is a law library which they can visit in order to help prepare their legal cases, but they're only allowed to visit it for 5 hours a week. One of the main areas of contention is how much access are these detainees actually getting to their attorneys. The government claims that every request for access has been granted either in person or via a video link, but detainees say that they've often gone a very long time without seeing their attorneys. And immigrant welfare organisations are claiming that the site is being used as a kind of black hole The detainees are going in there and then without notification of their attorneys or of their families, they're being transferred to other facilities in the United States, or they're actually being deported without notification.
Back in July, there was some reporting by the Miami Herald and Tampa Bay Times that revealed only a third of the detainees at the time had criminal convictions. You mentioned there earlier the purpose of this facility. What do we know about the type of people being held there?
So there are all kinds of people being held there. They're apparently segregated by colour-coded uniforms according to whether they have criminal offences or not. But certainly in this whole mass deportation effort, what we have seen is that all kinds of people have been deported, some of them with serious criminal records, but some without any criminal records, and some in cases where there's a serious dispute over whether they even legally can be deported. So because of the lack of transparency around facilities like this and around other immigration detention facilities, we often don't have a good idea of who is actually in these facilities. Maybe even the attorneys or families of detainees don't know that they're in this particular facility.
We know that there's been a lot of pushback against this facility and that a federal court back in June ordered operations to wind down. What do we know about some of the cases surrounding Alligator Alcatraz?
So one of these cases actually briefly shut down Alligator Alcatraz, and that was a case that was brought on environmental grounds. Environmental groups and local Native American groups argued that the facility had been constructed without the proper environmental impact studies that are necessary when you construct a federal facility. And they argued that this facility actually poses a significant risk to the ecosystem of the Everglades. That did lead to a court in Miami ordering the facility to be shut down. However, earlier in September, two Trump-appointed judges in an appeals court ruled that the facility could be reopened because they said that the facility had been built substantially with state money, with $450 million of money from the state of Florida, and therefore it wasn't a federal facility. Now, that is being appealed again because it's been pointed out that the federal government has since reimbursed Florida with $608 million of federal money, which indicates that it is very much a federal facility. And certainly it's being used as a federal facility by federal law enforcement agents. So we can expect that case to keep going. But for the time being, Alligator Alcatraz has been reopened and it's been filled up again with about 3,000 detainees.
And how much involvement does ICE have in the Alligator Alcatraz operations?
So ICE is the agency that is bringing detainees to this facility. I believe that the facility is actually being run by a private contractor, as many detention facilities in the United States often are. The private contractor claims that the conditions in Alligator Alcatraz are at least as good as they are in most prisons in the United States that actually house US citizens, but the detainees themselves, the ones who get out and are able to tell their story, they really dispute that.
And the recent crackdown on non-citizens has triggered anti-ICE protests across different parts of the country in America. What do facilities like this signal about the priorities and the motivations of the Trump administration?
Many people feel that facilities like this simply shouldn't exist on American soil, that they seem to exist in this zone of lawlessness and lack of scrutiny. In terms of what this indicates about the priorities of the Trump administration, they are very serious about meeting their targets of mass deportation. There are something like 11 million undocumented migrants in the United States. And people like Stephen Miller, Trump's senior political advisor, they indicate that they want to deport all of them, or as many of them as possible, with targets of at least 1 million deportations a year. So facilities like this really show how important that priority is. They also show that this is an important issue to Trump allies like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who has been on the outs a little bit with the Trump movement because of the fact that he ran a primary campaign against Donald Trump and now perhaps sees this as a way to get back into the favour of MAGA. But certainly deportation has become perhaps the central issue of the Trump administration. Not only is it the Trump administration's biggest priority, it is one of the things that that has attracted the most protests. So it really just shows the centrality of deportation in this administration.
And Trump visited the site before its doors opened in July, saying that it could be a model for future facilities. Have we seen any other developments of more facilities like Alligator Alcatraz?
There haven't been any other facilities exactly like Alligator Alcatraz developed in terms of their remote and makeshift nature. But there has had to be a massive expansion of detention facilities across the United States. At the moment, there are so many people being detained that existing facilities just can't hold them all. So other facilities are having to be repurposed as immigration detention facilities. And no matter how much they try to expand them, the conditions in general just seem to be pretty bad because they are detaining and holding so many people for such long periods of time.
David, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
My pleasure.
That was David Smith there, Associate Professor from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go though, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. It's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.